parts of the budget. We are very heavy in people. 85% of our budget is people, and the vast majority of our people are in front of students. So it's a place you would want to be in terms of a budget. And again, just as a final chart, broke it up by the 7 usual categories. We're asking for a general fund budget next year of, well, we're proposing to the school committee that they will ask for a general fund budget next year of $41,064,500, roughly a $1.7 million increase, or roughly a 4.3% increase from this year's spending. And this is the budget that we're putting forward for your consideration, discussion tonight, and ultimately vote at the next school committee meeting.
Well done. Very good.
Questions? Ms. Padera?
So I brought this up at the last school committee meeting, but I just want to bring it up again because it is concerning to me in looking at our budget. And, you know, obviously our budget is tight, but the elementary schools, and I don't have the numbers offhand, but I know Collicott's around 650 with the preschool. And all of our elementary school populations are seeming to be growing, and we still have the same administrative one principal there. And I know that we've checked around a little bit, and other schools have added some different personnel to help with administrative duties at these schools. And I'm just wondering if we could look at that again, because I do think especially at the Collicott, where they have the integrated preschool, they don't even have a preschool director. The principal has to be in charge of all of that, and it seems to be a huge responsibility. And my main concern is that we have these great elementary leaders, and that there's always the chance we could lose these elementary leaders for a place where they aren't overburdened with too many duties. I mean, you add classes. We added 3 elementary classes last year. You had classes, you had students, you had more teachers they have to oversee, and with the new evaluative tool, it's just a lot of responsibility. And I think it would be an important thing to look at in looking at our budget. So I would just suggest that we definitely look at the possibility of adding a preschool director. We're looking at adding pre-K initiative across the district. That preschool director could also be in charge of the curriculum across our district, with the high school program, with all the no-cost programs we're thinking of, or the no-cost program we're thinking of adding, and coordinate that, as well as supervising the preschool, the integrated preschool at the Collicott. So that could be an option. But in addition, for the other elementary schools, I just think that I would request that maybe administration meet with the leadership team to talk about how that's going and what they think they would need help with, especially with the new evaluation tool, and what I know the vice principal position isn't always a really popular position to add, so maybe we could look at other alternatives. How could we use our staff appropriately? It has to be a person that could help with evaluations, I would think, because that's a big part of what they're being overburdened with. But what opportunities would we have to make the elementary principal's job doable?
Sorry. This would just sound nice.
Yep. So just for the numbers, we have 2 elementary schools that are under 500, Cunningham and Tucker, but the other 2 are above 500, and Cunningham is 494, so right at that number.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
I mean, I think it's a really good point. And currently, we don't have anybody, or do we still have those teachers in charge?
Good question.
Type
No,
model.
nobody.
So we don't even have, like, when the principal leaves the building, somebody in charge?
Well, let
I
me.
mean, we have teachers in the classroom who's in charge?
No, we've used different models, and at one time we had stipends. I think Ms. Bagley Jones is speaking to, given to classroom teachers, but. I spoke to the Sharon superintendent on this issue today, and what we've found using that model, that the teacher is then out of the classroom and not in front of those students. So that was not a successful teacher leader. When the principal's out of the room, that teacher had to be called out of the room, so who's teaching those children? So that was not a successful model. It hasn't been resulted in an successful model. So now when the principals are out of the buildings, the responsibility really falls to, we have special education chairs and adjustment councils, but they're not certified administrators, but they, the observation is that they really have assumed the responsibility. And again, we're a district that's in close contact, proximity-wise, geographically. We're in contact with each of our principals every day, but those are the individuals who, again, don't leave their classroom, but they also might be in a SPED meeting, or they might be servicing a child.
Right. And then if there is an emergency at the school, it's the secretary at the front door. So I think it's a valid point to look at, both from an instructional point of view when the evaluations and all that, but also just from a safety point of view. If there's an emergency with a kid, if there's an emergency at the front door, if something happens, and maybe Ms. Sheehan can work on that with you, Ms. Gormley, since we're giving out homework tonight.
So I just wanted to ask, I
Kelly?
thought there were some Unit B personnel positioned in schools. I could be,
I should have,
Totally wrong,
absolutely,
but-
I'm glad you brought that up. So in the buildings, there are also curriculum coordinators. So this model has changed. We had curriculum coordinators at the elementary level in math that traveled to all 4 schools, and in language arts. And driven by our then Assistant Superintendent John Phelan and the leadership team, the model is very successful in that we have one curriculum coordinator that shares the responsibilities of language arts and math at the Collycock Cunningham, and then we have a half-time person at the Tucker and a half-time administrator at the Tucker, a half-time curriculum administrator at the Glover. And so they really have assumed the role of all of the curriculum areas, working in collaboration with the principal, and they work tightly together. So they are another resource, to Ms. Kelly's point, then we're not taking them out of the classroom. So if I called a school and a principal was at a conference for the day or not in school, Ms. Kelly's right. I'd go to the curriculum coordinator. If, again, 2 of them are part-time, if they weren't there, I'd go to the SPED chair of the adjustment council.
But can I follow up on that?
Sure.
I mean, I'm glad to hear that there's some extra bodies around in case there's an issue, but then to Becky's point, you know, the help for everything else that a principal has on their plate right now. And frankly, you know, there aren't many people who want to be a principal these days. I mean, it is, as Linda Lee knows, it's a tough, tough job. So I just think it's something that's worth thinking about as we move our advancement budget and as we try to, you know, help all kids succeed. You know,
Thank you.
the principals are an important part of that, too.
Mr. Zulus?
So if I understand it, 2 things have been raised. One is 2 good ideas. One is the preschool director, and 2 is help for the elementary school principals. So the question in my mind is, number 1, has the leadership team looked into these things and considered them? And number 2, if not, will you be able to prior to next week's meeting?
We've had initial discussions, and I'll be able to report out at next week's meeting.
Sheridan?
So I'm going to take my school committee chair hat off and put on my principal hat for a moment. I'm the
Say school
principal.
committee chair?
I didn't say school committee. I said my school committee hat, didn't I?
Oh, but you said chair.
I heard chair.
Did you?
That was last year, but it's okay.
I'm sorry.
We
I guess
understand what
said
you're
hat,
saying.
but that's okay. I just, personally, I'm the principal of almost 500 students in Boston, and I have 2 buildings. It's a K-8 full inclusion student school. But just to give you my perspective of what it's like to be an administrator today, our focus really needs to be on being instructional leaders. And the amount of responsibilities that principals have today are immense, and, you know, unless you're in a building, in a school building, on a regular basis, I don't think you really can understand the volume of demands on principals. So I greatly appreciate the work that all of our Milton principals do and value them immensely. But in order to be an instructional leader, part of that is the evaluation process that Becky raised. And that is a new process for the Milton Public Schools this year. It's not a new process for me. I've been doing that for 2 years now under a different process than you use, but similar. And it is extremely time-consuming. Is it valuable? Yes. It directly impacts instruction. And it's a wonderful activity, exercise, process. But again, it is time-consuming. And I just want to echo what Becky's saying, but not say that, I heard some creative suggestions here, and I think that it doesn't mean that every school necessarily needs an assistant principal, but I think that when you look at the whole picture of the demands on principals today, I think that it's worth looking further at. And I honest and truly don't believe, and I appreciate, Glenn, when you gave your presentation, you talked about the fact that most of the personnel that are on our rosters are in front of children. I just think that in today's world, that parents and community members would appreciate that we had 2 administrators, or 1.5, or however we can make that work, supporting the work of the school, in the schools on a daily basis, knowing every child. So I just need to share that. Thank you.
Any other discussion on fiscal 16 budget request? Do I have a motion for approval of the advancement budget request?
So move.
Oh, that was good. Moved by Ms. Sheridan, seconded by Ms. Bagley Jones. On the motion, all in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. So we'll move to the chairman's report and the long-awaited update on the MASC proceedings by Ms. Padera.
I have handouts.
Oh, my God.
No, I know you're going to want to read these because they're the minutes from the voting. I didn't want to get anything wrong. So we printed out the minutes for you all to read. There's plenty for everyone. Do you have one yet, Mr. Walker?
Ms. Padera, do you have a PowerPoint that you?
No, I don't. I would never do that.
Maybe music? Yeah.
No, no, nothing.
This is a little substandard.
Hand out those.
You can pass it down.
Whatever.
So, I'm not going to read all the resolutions to you. That's why I printed them out, really. But I will tell you, all of them passed, and I will tell you there was a lot of discussion. The big discussion during this resolution vote and throughout the conference was a lot on the controversy on testing, a lot on high-stakes testing, and there's actually a pretty organized group right now that's kind of against high-stakes testing. They feel like it, especially now with the new upcoming park, that it's really penalizing schools who have large numbers of students that are low-income level, because those types of students tend to do poorly on these tests, and we're penalizing these students, and we should be using testing in different ways and not using them to grade schools, things like that. That was a lot of the discussion. Then at the end, there was a lot of discussion about park, which the last resolution, I think you might have remembered, we talked about voting for that, but I actually ended up Resolution 7, I actually ended up voting against it because it was amended to include strike the words "conduct further examination of options for state evaluation and accountability system," and to suspend implementation of the Common Core standards as well as the park assessment. And they did actually re-amend that too, because that was accepted as a friendly amendment, to change the word "suspend" the Common Core standards to "re-examine." But I still felt that wasn't really within what we had been talking about, so I actually voted against that resolution because it included the Common Core standards. So I don't know how everybody feels about, but obviously it was my choice to make. The amendment still did pass, surprisingly to me, with a vote of 69 to 21 opposed. So there was a lot of discussion. I felt that a lot of people were even against the Common Core standards as well as the park testing. And I will tell you, there was a lot of discussion, and I will credit the administration for, I feel that within the room from the discussion, we are much more prepared for park testing than a lot of frantic school districts out there who are feeling underprepared and feeling that they're kind of left worrying about when the pencil paper version of the park is discontinued and they will not be prepared for with the technology that they have. And they think that the state has not helped prepare them for that. So that was how the resolution went, and just then a brief update on the rest of the conference. I will just tell you, all kidding aside, that every year I come back from this conference really energized about several ideas that come up. And so any of you that are, ever thinking about it, I really think it'd be a great idea for some of you to come, because I can't go to everything that I want to, and I see a lot of other people that have like 3 or 4 members, and I'm a little jealous because they all get together afterwards and talk. And I did see a friendly face there, though, a Mr. John Phelan. I don't remember. So I had lunch with him and his school committee chair. So anyways, there was a lot of really great presentations. I won't go over all of them with you, but like I said, if anybody ever kind of wants to come, it is a really kind of exciting place to be. There's a lot of different things you come to. Some of the meetings I come, and again, with the administration, there was a topic on the new discipline law, and it was really amazing to me that I felt like the most prepared person in the room. I knew everything, probably a little bit more even than I felt like our presentation was even better than the person presenting there. So I think that, I come back thinking, wow, we have a really great school district. We have great superintendents that allow us a lot of access to our buildings and to our people, and I think that's great, which you don't always see. I talked about the over-testing, a lot of discussion about not just park, but high-stake testing in general. The new word of the day is grit and rigor, and having your students, evaluated, doing a lot of surveys and determining if our students have that grit and rigor that they need to succeed. We'll be probably, Member Bagley-Jones and I will probably be talking a lot about that in terms of our social, emotional well-being surveys, things like that.
Can you define grit for us through this?
I was wondering about
grit
myself.
and vigor. I told you.
I think I have, but grit?
It's about the same. It's really about students.
Resiliency.
I'm sorry?
Resiliency.
Resiliency. It's really about, a lot of the surveys question, how soon would you give up on a problem if you felt you didn't understand it? Things like that. Really, not just a student's success, but when a student is challenged, how they react to that challenge. If they have, sometimes the students start off where they're really struggling, but that struggle is actually what makes them a stronger student. And so that's a lot of what people are measuring now, instead of just this academic success, but what happens when these students face challenges, and what happens, how do they approach that? So I thought that was really interesting. The transition program that, we'll be talking about later, but I did meet with Superintendent Gormley, and we were excited about this new program that we possibly might be able to bring to Milton schools, but we'll bring more on that later. It's Hingham has a program, several school districts have it, and it's really to help students that have come back from a hospitalization, either from maybe a mental illness or even concussions, and helping them get back to school without having setbacks to be re-hospitalized or drop out of school. Because, and I'm sure Member Bagley-Jones would know all of this, but mental illness is is probably the top group of students that do end up dropping out of school. And then the resolutions you have. So if you have any questions or need any handouts from my meeting, or free pens, because I've got lots of those, you just let me know and I'll fill you in on everything. Any questions?
I do.
Yeah.
I just want to tell the rest of the committee, I've told Chairman Walker that Ms. Padera comes back from the conference in the last 2 years and meets with me and shares 15 initiatives and ideas. And we sit down.
We prioritize.
We prioritize them. And we set up follow-up meetings with the appropriate personnel. And I feel like I did go to the conference. And I get a tremendous amount, and I appreciate that you bring it back. Sometimes, to your point, when we send staff to professional development, when you go by yourself, it can be lonely because you come back and you're the only one talking about transitions or different kinds of programs. But I have to say, you come back and you get everybody going on every single
Really excited.
one of the initiatives that you've learned about. And you're discerning, you decide what the priorities are.
Yes. And I think it was important, but I will let you know, I did miss our school committee meeting that night. I was thinking about you all.
You were representing.
Thank you for doing it, Becky.
No problem, anytime.
Thank you, Ms. Padera. So next item is a five-year financial plan approach. As you all know, we have a request from the selectmen to talk about a five-year projection. We've discussed at the last two finance subcommittee meetings what things we might need to do to prepare for that discussion. In addition, I've talked with Katie Conlon and with Tom Hurley. They both understand that we want this discussion to be a thoughtful one when we have it, and we'd like to get back to them as soon as possible with a date. So we asked the superintendent and her leadership team to give us a timeline for when they thought they could complete their tasks. As you can see, they've suggested that they could have those things done by a week from this Friday. That would allow us to meet on the 7th, which is our next meeting after the 10th, December 10th, to approve those educational priorities and budgeting assumptions. And then we're proposing a change here, if the committee agrees. Right now, our schedule says that we would meet on January 7th and then again on January 21st. We're proposing that we move the 21st school committee meeting to the 14th so that we could meet with the selectmen as soon after that as possible.
So for January, it would be January 7th and January 14th,
Right.
but not the 21st?
Correct.
Okay.
Any questions on that? Ms. Sheridan?
So when is the meeting with the Board of Selectmen?
We don't know yet. If we agree to this schedule, then I would say to them, we can meet anytime after the 14th of January, and they should tell us when they'd like to do that.
So is that the reason why you want to move the meeting to the 14th?
Yes.
So that we can give them more, have it earlier in the month? So would it be possible to, it looks like on the 7th you're presenting our priorities and budgeting assumptions, right?
That's an approval, so that would be a vote.
Right. And then the next meeting, we're approving the five-year projection. I'm
Correct.
just wondering, do those really need to be two separate meetings, or can that be done in one meeting?
Well, if the committee would delegate to, we talked about this at Finance Subcommittee, if the committee would delegate to the Finance Subcommittee the authority to approve the priorities and assumptions, so we could do that at whatever the next Finance Subcommittee would be after the 12th of this month, then yes, we could come to you with both the assumptions and the plan. So we thought that it better that the committee, we think these assumptions are pretty important, and the priorities are pretty important, because what we're saying is, in a level service environment, what are the things that we have to preserve? And that immediately begins a discussion about, are the advancement priorities the priority, or are there other things that we need to protect? What about the mandated cost? So it's a pretty important discussion, but if our colleagues want to delegate that to the Finance Subcommittee, then yes, we could approve the assumptions in Finance Subcommittee, develop the projection, and then have that ready for the 7th.
So I guess if they can't be done on the same night, is 1 week enough time to
We talked about
move
that
from the priorities to
We
the...
talked about that as well. So I think
Should've been there.
what's happening, what will be happening here is that we'll start at the Finance Subcommittee level, we'll be doing this in parallel anyway, but we want to make sure that the committee, so we'll have some preparatory work done, but we want to make sure that the full committee endorses these assumptions and priorities. That's the important
I
part of this
appreciate that,
discussion.
yeah. So, one more question, sorry. The Finance Subcommittee is going to be working on this throughout December?
Yes.
To prepare for January
Yes.
7th? Okay. So I know that those get posted, and if people wanted to be, to attend those, if any of the school committee
Absolutely.
members, we could come to those. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Padera?
So is the whole committee meeting with the Board of Selectmen then?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Zulus?
So along the lines of what Linda Lee was suggesting, I wonder if it makes sense to, on the 7th, have proposed priorities and assumptions and a proposed budget based on that, and then if things change, we can, if the proposed priorities and assumptions change based on that vote, we could rebake the numbers for the next meeting. I just wonder if, I wonder if it's, if there's consensus on the 7th on the priorities and assumptions. Now, I don't want to create too much work, because maybe it would create too much work to do the assumptions and the priorities and assumptions in the budget based on those, and then if we have to change it, maybe that would be too much work. But I just wonder if that's a plausible way to go.
Well, Ms. Kelly?
Just, I'm trying to figure out what we're trying to address. So are we trying to enable us to meet earlier in January with the Board of Selectmen? Or do we not, are we not available on the 14th as opposed to the 21st? To me, this is a good schedule that gives us flexibility. If by some chance everything's done on the 7th, I'm not sure that that is possible, but wonderful. But I think that the question is there, I think the first question is everyone available on the 14th to make this a change to our present calendar that, and it gives us some flexibility. So I guess that would be point number one. And then, depending on how robust the discussions are in terms of priorities going forward, I think, and we haven't even started those discussions and haven't received anything from the administration yet, I think it's difficult to predict whether we could commit to meeting earlier with the Board of Selectmen than sometime after the 14th. I guess that's, does that make sense?
I agree.
Mr. Zulus?
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't think we can commit to it. But if, as you say, we are able to do it on the 7th, I think the purpose of doing it on the 7th as opposed to the 14th is to do it earlier, because I think there is an interest in doing it. I think there is an interest in doing it earlier if we can. Earlier is better, if possible. So, so if we can do that, I think it would be useful if, but obviously I defer.
My recommendation would be, so now we're just talking about a week.
Yeah.
So my recommendation would be that we approve this schedule. If things go faster and better than anticipated, then we say to the selectmen, hey, good news, we got an extra week, and if you can meet a week earlier, then we can meet a week earlier. Ms. Sheridan?
So I'm just looking at the draft calendar of things that are coming up.
That's a good idea.
And it looks like we have, on the 7th, High School Site Council coming, the Program of Studies, review of our technology plan, PAC, and this.
Right, so as is always the case, the superintendent and I will look at the agendas and see whether we've got too full an agenda for any given meeting. But some of those are time sensitive, some of them aren't. So I think we have some flexibility to move things around.
And then for the 21st, or now moving it to the 14th, we have our open budget hearing, and, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of time to talk about the budget in January, too, so just.
No, there isn't. And by the way, also in January is the time where we talk about the reductions list if we don't get the requested amount in our budget request. So we have some difficult discussions in January. Ms. Kelly?
So I just want to ask, for purposes of our calendars change, if we vote this calendar change, are we then going to perhaps reconsider it on the 7th?
No.
Okay, so if we vote it, we're meeting on the 7th and the 14th. Okay, I
Right.
guess I would request respectfully that we don't schedule anything with the Board of Selectmen if we're going to be meeting on the 14th for a school committee
Right.
meeting in addition. So the earliest, I think, would be, after that point.
That's the plan.
And is this, I'm sorry, this is a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen, the warrant committee, and, so it's not on one of the
Correct.
regularly scheduled Board of Selectmen meetings, so.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
We have a motion for approval
So moved.
Second.
by Ms. Kelly, seconded by Mr. Zulus on the motion. All in favor? It's unanimous. Transportation and Traffic Safety Subcommittee, do we have any update? How are things going?
Mike, did you get my email?
I did.
Okay, so what we talked about separately by email and conversation was that we would try to identify a morning meeting date that we could have. I suggested Thursdays, because when we ask for people to join, we need to tell them when the meeting would be. Monday night, Mary, is the PTO president's meeting?
Yes.
And you're going to ask them if they have a volunteer?
From each school.
Right, from each school to put forth.
And I believe I offered to you and Mike Zulus, and Mike Zulus said he would come to the meeting and just articulate on behalf of the school committee what the charge would be for them to bring back to their PTOs.
And that would be great if Mike would like to do that. So if Mike would like to do that, I thought it might be a little bit of overkill in the sense of, usually on a special committee, you just put out the thing and who's ever interested comes back. But if Mike has that
you.
time to do that, that's great. Otherwise, I would just put out the notice that Mike wrote that was eloquent.
Oh, well, thank you. I certainly don't want to be guilty of overkill, but, if the superintendent thinks it's useful, I'll stop by.
I can't be there, maybe that's why I think it's overkill.
Well, I'll prepare some minutes and report as Becky did tonight, and you'll feel like you were there.
No slideshow. And then we would just, we couldn't remember if we had approved a community member to be on the committee.
We hadn't.
Okay, because that might, we can talk, I wanted Mike, Glenn, and I to talk a little bit about our format, and I did think maybe there's a community member position that might be helpful to have on it.
Did we have a community member in the composition of the committee? I don't think
No, we
so.
didn't. I'm just saying it might be helpful to have a community member as part of it.
So that'd be something we'd come back to the school
Right.
committee and
Right,
and
so
seek approval
tentatively,
for.
we were going to try to meet Thursday or Friday of this coming week.
Okay.
Okay, we'll talk.
Thursday, Friday, this Thursday, Friday,
No,
next Thursday, Friday.
And Mary, that works for the Director of Transportation. Does he have teaching obligations, or could he make a,
Is it going to be
He's-
monthly?
he's a key part of this
Right,
subcommittee.
and he is a full-time teacher.
yeah, what we were thinking of, or what I thought of and expressed, was that the three of us, maybe Mary with you, maybe not, because you have enough to do, just sort of meet and map out what we need to do and who we need to get at the next meeting, so therefore, when should the next meeting be? Because people like that have teaching, and I know the police have, what they need to do. So how would we figure that out? We need some logistical meeting time to do that.
So a logistical meeting, not a meeting of the subcommittee.
Yeah, I guess that, you could put it that way.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay, superintendent's report.
We were looking for a vote on the annual report. We gave it to the members, asked for any edits to be called in. No edits were called in, so I'd ask you to vote that. and we've asked Chairman Walker to draft a cover letter.
So, do we have a motion to approve the annual report, which we received several weeks ago?
Yes. So moved.
Moved by Ms. Bagley Jones, seconded by Ms. Padera. On the motion, all in favor?
Can I-
Ms. Sheridan?
No, that's all right, I'll come talk after.
It's unanimous. Ms. Sheridan?
I just wanted to comment on the annual report. So every year when we get that, I think it's just so impressive to see everything in writing all in one place, and I'm amazed at what a great job that Maura does in capturing it with everyone's input. So it's just an impressive document. I hope people in the community read it.
If I might, I would have been remiss and had to call everybody back later tonight. I have to recognize Maura Downs because this is valuable. It's a valuable exercise for the principals, and it's a tremendous amount of work on Ms. Downs' responsibility and part to work collaboratively, follow up every fact, and to create that annual report. So thank you, Maura.
Minutes more
And the principals.
in the minutes?
Do you have anything to say? Happenings?
Yeah, I'll figure something out.
Matt, aren't you missing something that you should be carrying in?
Yes, okay, thank you. So on the 22nd of November, the Best Buddies group participated in the 5K Gobbler from Massachusetts Best Buddy. We came in first place in the entire thing with the top funders. I believe it was $5,894 that Milton High raised. We brought home the Golden Gobbler again for our top high school earners, and also shout out to Jessie Hankard. She was the highest fundraiser in the entire thing, 1,300 and something. And then also, just going off the entire event, I know I talked about it at school committee, I sent home phone calls, all the work that the entire community did. We get to hold this in Milton. I think it's amazing that our Best Buddies group, not only do we get to be involved in something that's statewide, that like you get to meet so many great people from all across the state, but also you get to have it in your own hometown. It's a 2-minute drive. That not a lot of people have that. We have a huge luxury that we're able to do that. And I believe the entire event raised, I think it was $53,000 for Best Buddies, which is, I know I've said it 1,000 times here, but Best Buddies is a program that sets up one-to-one relationships with children with intellectual and developmental disorders. So it's something that's changed my life. I know it's changed other people in this room's lives. It's really a great, great, great cause, and I'm so happy that we could raise that much money for it.
Good job. Thank you.
And then also winter sports started this week. I know those will be starting up soon, basketball, hockey games, track, wrestling, and then unfortunately I guess I have to report on the Thanksgiving Day game. The football team played on the Thanksgiving Day game in Braintree, and we were unable to pull out a victory. We had a great season. We all had a lot of fun. I know all the seniors did, and we ended up losing that game 27-7. But like I said, we're keeping our heads up. It was an amazing season.
Thank you. Good for you.
Good.
That's it.
That's it. Facilities Subcommittee, Ms. Sheridan?
So I had asked that we revisit the charge of the facilities subcommittee, and Mr. Walker sent us out. Do you want to speak to what you sent and where it came from, Mr. Walker?
Sure. I have copies if anyone needs one. So thanks to our archivist, who has requested to remain anonymous, by some miracle, they were able to find the minutes from the September 27th school committee retreat. This is September 27th, 2004, and minutes from the October 5th, 2004 school committee meeting. And at the retreat, the school committee unanimously agreed to establish a subcommittee to commission a comprehensive facilities management plan. And then that was reiterated at the October 5th meeting that the subcommittee would begin to develop a scope for the development of a facilities management plan. So as far as we can tell, according to Milton Public School history, that's where it began, and that's the charge that was articulated at that time.
So as someone who worked very hard on the new buildings to get them built and served on the school building committee for many years, I take that responsibility for, as it said here, a comprehensive facilities management plan quite seriously and to heart. I feel that this is a responsibility we have not only to the schools and the people that work and live every day in the schools, but also to the taxpayers of the town. So the way that this subcommittee has been working, and we're very fortunate to have community members on this subcommittee that are talented in their fields and donate their time to come and meet with us and share their knowledge about facilities and management and electricians. I could go on and on about their skills that they have, but I think when I read this, the way I interpret it is that the charge is to be responsible for the schools, and I see that as everything that happens inside or on the school property that doesn't have to do with education. So it's the building, it's the grounds to the extent that we have responsibility over those, and the long-range planning and care of those. So I guess what I'm asking the school committee today, and what I have been asking for the last few months, is just some clarity around what our expectations are, because in the past, we did do, we were responsible for the capital needs, and we would, that would be something that we would work on as the capital plan, and that conversation would happen at facilities subcommittee. We would also talk about security and all the different things that come under security to the extent that it existed at that time. It's changed greatly in the meantime, and I don't mean participating in any meetings with police officers or the police department, but just how security is played out in the buildings of the schools. In addition to managing our ongoing bills and making projections, as Glenn was talking about tonight, when we think about, you know, where are we with our expenses? Are we under, are we over? You know, when we talk about how the schools are used and whether we're going to use the high school or the middle school for summer school, and those kind of decisions that are just vetted out through this process. So that's how I see this, but again, I don't need another job to do so. If the committee feels that the needs of the facilities subcommittee no longer exist, then I'm happy to do that. But I guess we, I'm speaking on behalf of the committee, would really appreciate some clarity around what the school committee feels, since we don't have a policy or a charge for an official charge for our subcommittee.
Ms. Kelly?
So I think the first question that's not necessarily directed to the subcommittee itself or our representative on the subcommittee, but do we have a comprehensive facilities management plan? I think that's the ultimate question, and that really is a question to the administration. And if we don't, what's the process by which we create it? Maybe it's through the subcommittee, whether it's how, you know, using internal resources or getting someone else to help out with that. But ultimately, that's what this charge was. And I know that over the years, you've worked on many different things, not the least of which is, you know, the whole light bulb replacement and saving of energy and all those kinds of great efforts. But I don't know that it was within the confines of a plan in itself that you would just be sort of, you know, keeping everything in line. So I think that's the question to ask, and I think, so I guess I ask it, and
Sure.
let's see where we
So I would say that it's that comprehensive plan has existed in different forms. When we became a consolidated facilities, and we moved away from just the school facilities program in the Milton Public Schools, that changed, because then Bill Ritchie was charged with doing, really a comprehensive look at all of our buildings. So we would review on a regular basis at facilities the roofs and the needs for that. When do those need to be replaced? When do different portions of the buildings need to be replaced? So that really is the work that we have done in the past, but part of that came under capital, and when capital went away from facilities, it felt like there was somewhat of a disconnect in terms of the work that we were doing.
Right, so I'm not saying this to say that I believe the facilities subcommittee is what should continue. I guess I'm just looking for the document and the process that is the plan, not just the roofs, it's all in, including the grounds, I would assume, to some extent. So if that doesn't exist, what would the administration suggest as a process to create it and to make sure that at least the school committee is apprised of it, and if necessary, that we help facilitate that with the work of a facilities subcommittee?
For example, just one other thing, so you mentioned the grounds. So when the field got turfed, or whatever the description is, the word is that describes it, that was part of a plan. We were watching that. We knew the life of that, and that was all marked out. So I would say that Bill Ritchie has that. Are we looking at it through that lens right now? Not in that way, because we've kind of veered away from it, big picture. But I know that when he came on when he changed his position to the consolidated facilities, that is absolutely the plan and the work that was done, especially when he first came. There was an assessment done of every single building, but we haven't met to report out on that going forward on a regular basis, again, because many of those expenses have to do with capital funding.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily just talking about the expenses, although those are definitely part of a plan. It would be the process for review. I think at one point they talked about, having a cycle for replacing filters across the board. And so if he has that plan, is he a member of the subcommittee?
Yes.
He is. So but you haven't talked about the plan per se. Because I think if you go back to this charge, the plan is the charge. So if you haven't seen it, then I think somebody needs to see it, and let's just, see what he has, and maybe bring it forward and see how if it's comprehensive and it's where it needs to be, maybe there is no additional need. I don't know.
Ms. Padera?
So I guess I just need some clarification. There was a connection with capital, and now there's not a connection with capital? What are we talking about here?
I'm not sure what that means.
Can you clarify?
So this year, none of the capital expenses for buildings came before the facilities subcommittee. It went through the finance subcommittee. So when the capital proposal came to the school committee, the facilities subcommittee had no input to that whatsoever. It went through the finance subcommittee.
So can you just remind me who was on the facilities subcommittee?
It's Glenn and myself and Bill Ritchie.
Okay, so Glenn and Bill Ritchie both, I think, proposed the capital from a buildings perspective. So it sounds like there's an internal process that needs to maybe discuss.
Well, my suggestion, Ms. Sheridan and I actually talked about this in June. My suggestion was that the facilities subcommittee schedule a meeting with Bill Ritchie. Of course, if he's on the committee, then
He's at all of our meetings.
schedule a meeting to say, what's the capital plan for the next 5 years? I don't think that precludes the finance subcommittee from reviewing the capital plan, but I think both are possible, that the facilities subcommittee could review it first, and then the finance subcommittee could review it.
Would that help things?
Can I just,
Yeah?
I think whatever plan works out to support the committee's work would be important, because I remember how bad the schools were and how the oversight was so important. And Bill Ritchie is doing a great job and the whole consolidated facilities, but your committee kind of has to be the watchdog for what is needed. So I think that is really important, and I appreciate you bringing it up, because none of us want to get back to where we were. And so, whatever, if it makes sense to go through you guys first and then define, I don't know what makes sense about it for capital things, but it's helpful that somebody is minding the store, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So thank you for that, and I think it should continue and be solidified.
I think Ms. Kelly's point is an important one. I think the first order of business would be to review the comprehensive facilities management plan, and if we don't have one, then let's talk about how we get one. Since clearly that was the charge, it would seem to me that the first place to start would be to say, did we finish that? And if we finish that, then there might be some other things to do, but that's a pretty important role, and I don't think we have a comprehensive facilities management plan, but if we do, I'd certainly be interested in seeing it.
I think it was 2 years ago, Mr. Ritchie, through the, actually through appropriation of town meeting, did a comprehensive facilities study with recommendations for a plan in it. We can get copies of that and bring it forward. I just wanted to point out also the other folks on the committee. One is the facilities manager for in the hospital district. One is a person who's with an electrician background. Third works for one of the energy companies. They have been great help in designing ways to approach our facilities, how to get some of those energy savings that Linda mentioned, where the contacts are with those sorts of things, and how to put those plans together from people who are really experts in their field, unlike me, for instance, who just sits there and tries to add up the numbers. These are people who do it for a living, and they're great sources of reference for Bill, because it's people he can talk to who do the same sort of work that he does, and they bounce ideas off each other, and it's a good group to work with. The history has been we've been meeting roughly every other month for the last few years. But but back to the question of the plan, I can talk with Mr. Ritchie and get out the results of the comprehensive facility study that was done 2 years ago, I think it was.
But I would distinguish between what was a townwide facilities audit and a comprehensive facilities management plan. The hard part of that discussion is, okay, so unless you have an unlimited amount of money, what are the priorities and what's the timeline? And we haven't moved from the audit to those next important steps. So I think certainly if you haven't seen the audit, it's comprehensive in that it says, here are all the things that you should do and here's how much they cost. But I think there's quite a bit more work to be done to call it a facilities management plan.
So it seems like it might, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, so then beyond that, beyond the plan, which appears to have been the charge, it sounds like that there were 3 areas that this committee was reviewing, considering, responsible for capital planning, security, and managing bills and projections. If those are 3 areas that this committee was doing, whether or not it was charged to, I guess the first question is, should it be doing those, and then should it be reconstituted and recharged to do those things? That's one question. And then the next question is, if those areas sat in that committee previously, where do they sit now? And should they sit where they sit now going forward? At least that's the way. Is that fair?
That's good, yep.
So what's the next step?
So you want answers to those questions? Of where do they sit now?
Yeah, I mean, I can guess. I can guess where they sit now. A lot of them seem to go through finance, just from my experience there. A lot of them seem to go through finance, but I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. So I think Mr. Walker mentioned this earlier. Everything's going to come before finance, before it comes to this committee. If it needs to start in your committee, that's fine. I'm a little confused because the people who have provided us with information are the same people that are sitting on your committee. So I don't know whether, like, have you been meeting on a monthly basis?
We haven't been meeting since I brought this up because there were a lot of questions
Right.
around it.
So I think that's part of the issue. I
Met in the fall.
think the committee itself needs to perhaps meet and then, sort of go over the topics that Mike just detailed and said, so how, we used to do it, we didn't do it this year, and so should we be doing it? That might be a good place to start, because I don't know what's changed. I'm a little baffled, because I think capital has always come before the finance subcommittee, and capital is not just facilities capital, it's more than that. So,
I guess I'm just saying that it never came to the facilities subcommittee. So, and I wasn't on the school committee or obviously on facilities subcommittee in 2004, so I wasn't knowledgeable about this, but I could say that certainly this is the work that we have done in the past, and I'm happy to take this back to the committee and say that, going forward, that thinking about the three questions, or the 3 points that you just brought up to Mike, and have that discussion at our next meeting. I really I feel like the committee was feeling like they needed to be validated in terms of, is there still a need for this committee? And so that's where this all came from, and that's why I've been asking this question, and so I appreciate this conversation and the research it took to find this charge from 2004. Thank you.
So we have no citizen speak topic response. Next meeting agenda items, I think we're clear. Ms. Padera?
I have some next meeting agenda items.
Okay.
And they don't have to be the next meeting, but I'd just like to put them on the agenda for the near future. That we look at space in terms of space in the schools. I'm just getting a little concerned with our increased numbers every year, and I'd like to look at it in a broader scope. Suggest that we look at the number of the students, how it's increased in the last 3-4 years, or what the trend is, and to see if we can predict if we're going to have a space issue in the next, oncoming years, this year and the next.
So, just so I'm clear, space, class size, space just to accommodate whatever the
Additional
enrollments are?
students, yeah, enrollment,
Okay.
and how limited we are growing in space based on enrollment and the continuing increased enrollment. And then this second agenda item would be that we look at the numbers in the elementary school districts, how the districts are growing, and if we're going to need to move students or tweak district lines in the years to come.
So elementary school districts enrollment?
Yes. Clarified.
Ms. Sheridan?
I have a question for the next meeting agenda about minutes of our meetings. So
Yeah.
I don't know about the rest of you on this committee, but I have a hard time remembering what happened 2 meetings ago, and we haven't approved any meeting minutes since back in May. And so if there's some way we could bring that up to date and approve those minutes, and going forward, maybe just have them go out to all school committee members from the get-go, and so we can keep current with them if that's what needs to happen.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Kelly?
We had talked earlier in the year about the French-English analysis.
Yes. we've been trying to schedule a presentation date with Ms. O'Dwyer, and as it turns out, she teaches on Wednesday nights, so we're looking to see if during the school break, we can get her in. So that hopefully sometime in January.
Is there a presentation available? I appreciate that we want to share with the public, but to me, this is important information.
If I might? She and her teaching assistant have spent a tremendous amount of their, volunteering their time to do the analysis. It's grown into a huge project. They're coming Friday morning to finish. And so I can get that out to you and then schedule her around your meetings in January, or maybe not to be so bold, is to make another meeting to have her come and do the presentation. But she met with all of the elementary team. We brought in the middle school team because we were actually doing analysis. She's following students in groups of cohorts, so it grew into a huge project. But Dr. Laura Dwyer is a Milton resident. She teaches at Boston College. She travels internationally, and she has given her a tremendous amount of her time. So to Ms. Kelly's point, it grew. It just kept growing, and people were asking questions every meeting. I'll have the report to give to you as of Friday, and I'd like to schedule her to come.
Can I just
Sure.
say something about that? I think she has break until January 15th.
That's what I said to Mr. Walker. I
But
said
other than that,
she
won't have break until Easter.
so I thought we might get her in January, even if we have to come up with some nights.
But she teaches on Wednesdays, so
Right.
that's why I'm saying before January 15th would be good to get her.
She's-
Maybe on a Wednesday.
Okay.
Okay, entertain a motion to go into executive session, not to return to public session for the purpose of discussing contract negotiation strategy for non-union personnel and collective bargaining strategy for MEA and AFSCME, the discussion of which in public session would be detrimental to our negotiating or bargaining positions. This is a roll call vote. Ms. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Bagley-Jones? Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Padera?
Yes.
Ms. Sheridan?
Yes.
Mr. Walker, yes.